Hello and welcome to another Paint With Me, painting process type video. So January is a big art challenge month for a lot of artists, and I really wanted to have a go at a challenge, but I don't have the best track record with them, to be honest. I've never completed one. So I decided this year to do the Birbfest2025 challenge, but the mini one that Monkeymintaka arranged, running alongside the main one of just 5 birds. And I'm very glad I did, because I managed to complete it by the skin of my teeth. So there's no way I could have done the full 31. But it doesn't matter, it still counts. And I'm really chuffed that at long last I have completed a challenge, even if it's just a mini one. It's a really good idea to have that available to people like me that struggle with the full 31 days. So, as is typical of me, I really struggled to whittle down the reference photos that I was going through on Pinterest to just one. So I ended up doing 3 sketches of the first bird, which was the Lady Ross's Turaco. And even though I went to the effort of sketching it out first, before sketching out all of the birds on the page first, I still ended up making quite a big error as far as composition is concerned. And it bugs me, I have to say, it bugs me every time I look at it. It just annoys me that I didn't realise sooner, or that I wasn't willing to undo it. It would have been so simple to just rub it out and change the composition. For some reason I didn't. Anyway, and then because there was this weird little gap in the bottom right-hand corner, I did a small, tiny little Lady Ross's Turaco. But really all the birds are in the wrong place. Never mind. And now that I've done the initial outline sketch and knocked that back a bit with a kneaded eraser, I'm making a better sketch over the top of that. And I think the sketching stage is always my favourite part of the whole process, just because I love figuring out the shapes, and I love loose, scribbly lines. To me, it's just fun and instantly gratifying. And I decided this time around to try to keep those lines in on the big bird, to see what it looked like after I painted over them. So I only knocked back completely the line work of the other 2 birds. So when it came to painting the birds or colouring them in, I decided to use different mediums, and also to use those mediums in different ways. So I used neocolour 2s for the first 2 birds, but decided to use a different technique for each one, because I'm still testing them out, honestly, and trying to find ways of using them that work for me. So with the first bird, I mixed the neocolours with water on the palette, and then painted with them as you would traditional watercolour. Then with the second sketch, I put the neocolours on the page first. So using them like crayons, scribbling in, colouring in really, and then I applied water. And this time around I decided to use different paper, because I found that cold press watercolour paper, it was just too textured, and it was really hard to blend out the neocolours without lifting the previous layer. So I thought that this mixed media paper by Canson, which is much smoother, would be a better choice. And to be honest, although I didn't have the same issue with texture, the paper didn't like the amount of water I was using, which is through no fault of its own, because it's mixed media, it's not watercolour paper. Especially when it came to the background, I was trying to achieve this loose kind of gradient by applying a fair amount of water. And it just didn't like that at all. But I think that's because I was expecting too much of the paper, really. It is a mixed media, not a watercolour paper. So next time, when I use my neocolour 2s, I think I'm going to try hot press watercolour paper, and I think that should work really well. So I usually work roughly from top down, but I'm also aware of the need to get the lighter colours in earlier, and the beak is definitely the lightest part of this bird, so I focus on that fairly early on, and then after that I just move on around the bird to whichever bit makes sense to me at the time, getting initial layers on, and then trying to build up value. And it's about now that you can see more clearly the bizarre choice I made to overlap these two birds. I don't know why I did it. And it wouldn't have been such a big deal if the feathers on the bit that was overlapping weren't exactly the same colour. So it's really hard to distinguish what's going on there. And yeah, so I struggled quite a bit with the colour of these wings. I tried to include as much colour variation as possible between purples and blues, so it wasn't just one solid block of colour. And that's basically my approach for the whole of the first bird, is just applying as many different colours as I can get away with, as quickly as possible, so I didn't end up with too many harsh lines. And I think I definitely need to put in more time practicing watercolour techniques. I think I've only tried out wet into wet techniques once, which sounds mad. And I remember as I was painting this bird, I kept wondering whether maybe that wet into wet technique for that initial layer would have been a better choice. But the great thing about mixed media is that you can go over the top with other things to soften out edges if you need to, and add interest with other colours and so on. And I think when I'm in the thick of it, I seem to forget that, and I get into this mad panic to get the paint down as quickly as possible. Yeah, so I think I just need to relax more, just have a what will be kind of attitude, and I can always go over the top later with other things. But anyway, it turned out okayish in the end, apart from the composition thing and the background, which I keep intending to go back to and fix. So given that this is a January 25 challenge, I thought it made sense to talk a little bit about my plan for the year. So I didn't used to make New Year's resolutions, but in the last couple of years I've started seeing it as an opportunity to assess where I'm at and where I want to be moving forward. And I don't really set specific goals or targets, like I will achieve this thing by this point, because I don't do well with that. For some reason it becomes this huge pressure, and it sort of gets my back up. And I think I've got this sort of natural oppositional thing going on, where if someone says to me, do this, my immediate instinct is, well, actually, no, I'm not going to do that, even if it was something that I was intending to do. And even with myself, if I say to myself, right, I'm going to do this, and this is really important, I'm going to try and achieve this by this point, suddenly a bazillion other things will become equally important as the deadline approaches. And I never seem to be able to just set a target and achieve it. So anyway, for that reason, I don't set New Year's resolutions as such. Instead, what I've started doing is having a think about what's important to me and what things I want to focus on, and then I write out some intentions for the year. And that does just sound a bit like goals in stealth mode, doesn't it? And maybe they are, but I think there is this fundamental shift from outcomes to processes, and that's released a whole load of pressure from me, because I'm not saying I'm going to achieve this, I'm saying I'm going to work on this, I'm going to focus my attention on this thing. So for example, one of my intentions is to experiment with different mediums, and there's no goal as such other than spending an unspecified amount of time each month using a medium that I don't regularly reach for. And I'm not expecting to create a work of art with it, just use it, this new medium, and see what happens. So it's about as low pressure as you can get. And I'm not attaching any expectations to it. I'm not saying each week I'll spend 2 hours doing this. It's just something I've written down, a list of intentions to remind me as I go on through the year that these are the things that I want to focus on. These are the things that are important to me. So anyway, my intentions as far as my art goes are, one, to illustrate full scenes as well as individual subjects, because I've noticed when I'm looking through my sketchbooks that it's just subject, subject, subject. And very rarely is it like a full scene, like a full illustration. I'll see a cute photo of a dog and I'll sketch the dog, and that's it. And there'll be no background or anything like that. So I definitely want to try to illustrate full scenes. I also want to experiment with different mediums. That's a really important one to me. to regularly practice colour mixing. That's very important, and I feel like one of the biggest obstacles I have, one of the biggest barriers in a way it feels like, to painting and things like that is how little I know about colour mixing. Like I can't just very quickly mix the colour I want to achieve. I'm also not one of these artists that has this natural ability to be able to sense what colours go well together. So I need to spend some time, first of all, colour mixing, but also studying colour theory. And then my last intention is to document my progression and share it with others on YouTube, which, it feels important to me that I do that. You know, I want to reach out, and I want to build a community, and I want to learn from other people. And one of the favourite things that I do in my spare time when I'm like too tired to do art is watch other artists on, you know, painting and talking about their experiences. So anyway, it does sound a bit wishy-washy. And of course I do have goals, like I want to illustrate a children's book that I've written, and ultimately in years to come I want to create an illustrated version of a fantasy fiction trilogy that I wrote. But if I set them out as goals to achieve within a certain time frame, then I feel as if I'm setting myself up to fail. I just don't like that kind of pressure. I don't do well with expectations, even when they're my own. And I don't know, it does sound silly when I say it out loud. I'm sure I'm not the only one who struggles with goal setting. So back to the birds, and I've nearly finished scribbling in with the neocolour 2, and I've tried to do the same thing as when I was painting directly onto the page with this second bird, which is to add a bit of colour variation and value difference. And then I'm going in with a brush and applying water to the pigment, and it is a very satisfying process. I love how water seems to intensify the colours of those pigments. And then I go back in with crayons again, trying to add more variation, and not really even worried about how close I'm getting to the reference photo at this point. That ship has well and truly sailed, but more trying to knock back a bit of intensity here, maybe increase a bit there, and always trying to break up big blocks of colour, like the left-hand side of the bird's body, for example, which at the moment it just is that great blob of dark blue. So just tinkering, really, until I run out of ideas. And then I move on to the last bird. And for this one, I decided to use coloured pencils, another medium I'm not particularly experienced with. But this time I specifically chose the smaller of the birds for the coloured pencil. So I learnt my lesson with the sleeping rabbit that I sketched. And I posted a YouTube video of that process if you want to take a look. And I'll link it at the end of this video. But it took ages. It was fun and it turned out great, so it was worth the effort, but it did take a long time. So I deliberately chose the smallest of the birds for coloured pencil. And yeah, I thought this guy would take no time at all, and it was much quicker, but still really challenging, especially in terms of achieving dark values and shadow shapes, which was something I struggled with in the sleeping rabbit sketch. So anyway, I started out with a really light colour. I think I pretty much lost that colour under subsequent layers. And towards the end, I did try to erase bits of the dark blue so that I could reapply some of the lighter colour. But it didn't seem to work out. And I think maybe just the eraser was too big for the size of the sketch maybe. So yeah, it didn't work out too well. But there's not a lot else to say about it really. I'm just layering up the coloured pencil, trying to get rid of the white of the paper, and eventually getting around to the red on the wings and the head. And once the bird is done, I realised that I was going to have to quickly sketch out some of the background in coloured pencil too, because I think it would have looked a bit weird if I just had this bird floating in a generic background of greens and browns. So I sketched out the branch it was standing on and some of the dirt, but really just trying to get away with as little detail as possible, because by now I was heartily fed up of Lady Ross's Turacos. Yeah, I've got to remind myself not to stick to one bird. Why do I do 3 of them? So silly. And finally, the generic scribbly neocolour 2 background that was supposed to end up looking like this beautiful loose watercolour gradient type effect, but didn't work out that way at all. I went for greens in the bottom half of the page. So I thought that would make quite a nice contrast with the red feathers. I thought they would pop out quite nicely. And then I tried to transition to my favourite beige colour for the upper half, with a few warmer colours mixed in, but it looked pretty bad, so yeah, I went back over it with a bit of kitchen towel, hoping to rescue it with, you know, dabbing out a few lighter spots here and there. And that did help a little bit, but honestly, there's just no getting away from the fact that the background sucks. I hate it. That's definitely something I need to get better at. I particularly hate the way the green hedge type thing, it's just this horizontal line across the page. Yeah. And every time I look at it, I promise myself I'll go back and sort it out, but I have a terrible memory, and I don't know, I think my brain is just too full of other ideas and projects for me to come back to this one. So I'm gonna make my peace with it and use it as a reminder of what not to do. And that's it. It's finished. So this is a photo of the finished sketch, and despite the background and obviously the composition side of it, I like how it turned out. I love the texture of the coloured pencil bird, and I think I managed to do, I definitely did a better job achieving a dark value this time around. And I do like the neocolour two birds. I think I'm really looking forward to having a go on some hot press watercolour paper though. I think that's going to be the sweet spot for the way that I use neocolour twos anyway. But yes, if you're still here, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you the very best of luck with your own creative projects, whatever they may be. Bye!